So it's time to change the battery on this car. This one here's got some years on it. It's definitely had its up and downs of in and out of the shop, and the previous owner had let it sit for quite a while. So due to improper maintenance, as well as just the sheer life of the battery is pretty much spent. So I got about 3 years out of it, so I can't complain too much. And we're just going to replace it now. So when we do this, you have a couple of long bolts like this. As you see, I've got a little corrosion on this one after I've already pulled it out. There's one on each end, one here and then one back here, and there's a steel plate that goes across the top to hold that in place while you're driving. So we're going to wind up cleaning up the corrosion, because you don't want to leave it in there. That winds up just slowly eating away at the metal until eventually you have to either replace the parts, or if it's eating into the pan of the car, you wind up having to do some welding and rebuilding of parts of the car to help hold that battery back in. So it's best not to let that go very long if you ever catch it. Get it good and cleaned up. Retouch it with some paint if you need to, and then put it all back together. Same thing on your battery cables. If you see corrosion on your battery cables, you want to get it off quickly. As you see here on this cable, it's got a braided grounded cable. So if you start getting a bunch of corrosion off in that braid, it's going to be really hard to get it out. They do have chemicals and stuff you can spray and dip it in to help clean it up. Unfortunately, this ground only runs just right over here. So if it ever did get in your ground, as long as it hasn't done too much damage to the actual metal, you could probably get it good and clean, simply because it's just such a short cable and you can pull it out and clean it. But the power cable, as you see, has a plastic sheathing on it on this model, and most cars are this way on both the power and ground side of the battery. So this car is kind of an oddball with the ground just being the open braided cable. So keep that in mind on other models. You get corrosion that starts off here at the front and then starts working its way down through the cable. You're going to have a lot more work to clean that up and not have to buy a new cable, or you're just simply going to wind up buying a new cable. And depending on how long they are, once again, this one here, not too bad. It runs back over this junction box. So I don't expect it to be terribly expensive. So this is a XK8 battery classification. If you go looking for one, you're probably going to be looking somewhere around the 150 mark at the low end. And of course, something like this Bosch here, this has a pretty decent warranty on it, 96-month. So that means it was probably up there, probably somewhere around $500, maybe even more. Original OEM batteries, they're probably going to be pushing somewhere around 500 to maybe even on up to 1,000. I pulled the spare tire because there was quite a bit of dirt and grime in here. Also pulled the tool kit, but I've already put it back in. So we just cleaned out the whole trunk area here. Just to, I'm already in here doing the battery. Might as well take a extra 5-10 minutes and clean up my trunk good. So just broke everything loose with the brush and then vacuumed it all up. When I couldn't vacuum, I wiped up with a damp rag. And we've got all the corrosion away from the studs. And as you see here, you've got 3 studs for this side. That's if you wind up using a different size battery than the maximum size battery. As you can see, the kind of footprint that's been there. So this car's pretty much ran the full size battery all the time. So we're fixing to put, once again, another full size battery back in. We've got our bolts cleaned off, ready to mount it back in. So we'll show you some of that here in a second. As I mentioned before, this is a XK8 AGM battery. Well, this here, of course, Autocraft is the brand. You will notice that the battery post on this brand new battery, it is a little corroded. Same thing on the positive side. So we're just going to clean those up. So the tool, these come in different variants. Some of them are all metal, some are like this, plastic, and of course metal brushes in here. and they come apart. So if you need to do if you need to do inside the clamp, you can use this end to do the inside of the clamp. But simple little tool. You slide it down on the post as you twist. I want you to go all the way down, and then of course twist and come back up. That gives you a nice clean post to make contact to. And of course we're going to do the same thing on the negative side. So now we have a nice clean post. I am cleaning the top of the post as well, because there was a little corrosion, and once it starts corroding, that will just spread. So once it's in the car, we will add some dielectric grease to it. Once the clamps are on, we will be putting a little dielectric grease in between the clamp and the post, but that'll help keep corrosion down. And of course just simply monitor it over time and clean up anything that starts coming up. The battery's in with the clamp loosely on top. You see here we have the stud runs all the way down. They had washers on this originally, I don't know why, but the thread is more than enough in length to go ahead and run it all the way down and have it to where the head of the bolt doesn't need any washers at all. So while you're dropping it in, you do have several things here, such as of course the battery cables. Kind of tuck those off to the side so they're out of the way while I drop it in. There's a couple of cables back here that are just kind of loose, part of packages that I don't have. I went ahead and tucked them back a little bit and kept them out of the way as well. So just be sure to do that when you're putting the battery back in. Don't want to accidentally crush or get something stuck underneath it. Other than that, we're going to tighten this down, and then we'll put our battery post back on. So when it comes to our tie downs, be sure and get them down to where they're kind of snug, and just go back and forth a little bit. As I said, you can see there's still a lot of threads there, even though I'm starting to actually cinch down on the battery. It doesn't have to be super tight, just a couple of good turns until it gets good and tight. I do not have the torque specs on this, but I would not expect it to be extremely high. You just simply need to get it taut, because you don't want to crush the battery, of course. But once you have it tightened down, that battery is not going anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and hook our positive terminal on and get it all the way down on the post. We don't want it hanging up. We actually want the post sticking out ever so slightly higher than the connector. And the same thing over here. We want to simply connect it and have the post sticking up ever so slightly than the connector. We'll tighten these down and then put some dielectric grease on there to keep corrosion down. We'll tighten down the 10mm nut on the side of the battery post here. Get it good and clamped. Just get those nice and tight. Once again, no torque specs. Just getting it good and tight. Once it feels tight, just check, make sure it's not got any play. And there you go. Put your dielectric grease over it. Just kind of smear a little around with your finger if you have to, or a rag. And you're done.